Hello and welcome to the Classic Car Weekly podcast. We're back for the final time in 2024 because, well, out today is our sort of pre-Christmas bumper issue, and we've got a sort of pre-Christmas podcast issue. It's not necessarily a bumper issue, but we have got a fair few voices coming together for this one. I'm the title staff writer, Jesse Billington, back again in the slightly echoey room here at Classic Car Weekly headquarters, and I'm joined by managing editor James Sadlier.
Greetings.
And features editor Chris Hope.
Hello.
And we'll kick off as we always do with a quick Our Classics update. Have you been up to anything since we last spoke with your classics?
I've not. No, apart from mine's a daily driver, so I'm using and enjoying all the time and loving it. I'm still loving it. It is getting, the more I use it, the more rattly the more rattles I'm noticing. It's really, as the car goes over 60,000 miles, I'm starting to have to force myself to worry less about preservation, unfortunately. But I've just written an Our Classics on it, which I've sent to features editor Chris Hope.
Thank you very much.
And it got some comments at some car shows, some positive, some not so positive. But certainly one thing some people are noticing is that the paint finish is a typical 80s red and it's faded in the sunlight. I haven't noticed it as much, but people, if you pass it by, so maybe that's something to do in 2025.
I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? You only notice it when you sort of in chunks. If you see it in your car every day, you don't notice that gradual shift in paint tone. It's got that sort of typical Volkswagen pink that the red always tends to fade to.
I think it has come back. It's not that flat.
It's not too bad.
By no means is it concourse, but equally, as you say yourself, you use it daily sort of thing. Did you get the bumper pushed out?
I
haven't got that yet?
Time for that. Yeah, that's going to be a 2025 thing. I've almost kind of left all those little mini jobs until I get back after Christmas, including a service as well.
For the to-do list.
Yeah, there's a long to-do list on the Polo, but I'm enjoying it, and that's the main thing. It's touch wood. It's just been reliable for me, and I love that.
I've got my first event of 2025 lined up. Got tickets arrived last night for the Sunday Scramble at Festive Heritage.
Very nice.
So hoping to take the Mini along to that. Looking forward to it. It's always a good event. So
yeah, the Scramble's always a good bit of fun. I think I'll see you there for that one. I'm heading along because I know Haggerty are doing their bullring sort of market sort of prediction for the year, so that'll be quite interesting. I think Broad Arrow Auctions have also got sort of the official opening of their showroom there as well. So there's it
just continues growing, doesn't it, that place?
Yeah, it's sort of constantly sort of evolving and shifting. And I was there at the assembly weekend just gone actually, and having a sort of chat with a few people in the know about sort of the developments going on the far side of the airfield, and it's constantly growing and changing. So it's an interesting sight to sort of see adapt. And again, there's still this great support for the classic businesses, and there's sort of new modern motoring sort of sites opening up on it as well. So there's going to be this great longevity to it as a project, which I like. Meanwhile, with the MG, I can't remember if I mentioned last time that I'd found that it spun a bearing on the crankshaft. So that's pretty much written off that block.
Diagnosing it's half the issue, isn't it? Sometimes, and then suddenly you've got something to work from. So, have you done any more work since last week on the MG?
I haven't really. No, I was sort of flat out this weekend gone with obviously meeting over at assembly over at Bicester Heritage and early family Christmas.
Which explains why your Jimmy is currently covered in fairy lights.
Yes, it is currently bedecked in Christmas lights for the festive four-wheelers Bicester assembly.
And is that set to come, are those Christmas lights in your Jimny set to come on as the sun goes down? Is that right?
They're on a timer, so I think at about 4:30 those will come on. So we'll still be in the office when they come on.
Sort of
We'll have to put a photo up on the website or on social so readers and listeners can see the glory, the festive glory. Maybe we should sing a carol outside the chimney. That would be quite good.
Not carols by candlelight at like one of the big cathedrals. It's just sort of Christmas songs next to a belit chimney.
Yeah, maybe change some of the words to say Classic Weekly or Suzuki Chimney. I don't know.
There is a reworked version of Dashing Through the Snow. It's a sort of American version in a rusty Chevrolet, and that one is quite fun to listen to. But anyway, we're already getting sidetracked as we often do on this podcast. We'll jump into what is going to be sort of the big story for this week's edition of the podcast. And if you've picked up this week's issue of Classic Car Weekly,
on sale today.
It's a 2-week. It's much like the Radio Times does. It's 2 weeks of classic heft, and we're looking back on the cars of 2024. We've gathered 12 cars, one for each month, and sort of brought them together for a big sort of photo shoot and sort of inspection to sort of see why these cars marked out the most important months or most important milestones for classics this year. And I think it's only fair to hand over to Chris, the features editor, who really sort of pulled this one together to sort of dive into the behind the scenes on how we did it.
Yeah, I mean, conversations began with editor David Sinister in sort of August time. We wanted to do something special with it being the big issue of the year, the one that's on sale for 2 weeks, upsized pagination. So yeah, definitely worth taking a look at. And yeah, we do big photo shoots. We will talk about some of the other photo shoots we've done this year, I'm sure, later on. But yeah, it tends to be sort of 4, 5, maybe 6 cars. So gathering 12 cars in one place was a bit of a daunting task, sort of thing. But we, as Jesse sort of explained, we were looking to sort of pick the cars that we felt represented the most important headlines of a given month. So things like July, we chose the Suolo Duretti. We chose it because that was a car whose car club, Suolo Owners, Duretti Owners Club, we were Interclub International. That was a big sort of gathering of multiple different car clubs at Malvern at Three Counties Showground. They had 7 cars, a display of 7 survivors, and given that only 300 were made in the first place, incredibly rare car sort of thing. So to gather 7 of those together was quite a big deal sort of thing. So we decided that was the biggest event of July. So yeah, it was that kind of thinking. So just identifying the stories that we went big on in a given month sort of thing. So. Yeah.
I will add something. There's a real sheer variety in those 12 cars as well. Every single car is sort of sufficiently different from the next, whether it be age, prominence, or just nature of the news story. But you did brilliantly collating that together.
Thank you.
All 12 people and all 12 cars to turn up, be mechanically sound with 12 happy owners on that day for that photo shoot, and then for us to do interviews, two interviews each. And I have to say, the owners of the cars were absolutely fabulous. So hats off to them, and it's a great read. I mean, we're obviously going to promote it and say it's the best issue we've ever done, but personally, I absolutely loved it. So hats off to you, Chris.
Yeah, no, it was a really interesting piece to see sort of come together. And obviously we mentioned sort of, it was interesting picking out some of the cars. I think we've got everything from pre-war just right the way through to absolutely cutting-edge modern day.
It's the newest car we ever covered. We have an MG Cyberster at the event, and a brave choice, some might say, sort of thing. I mean, I absolutely see its need to be there. It's, the first MG Roadster since the MG TF, which is, been out of production now a good 10 years sort of thing. So big deal to have that sort of back. When you think back to sort of the golden age of sports cars, you think of MG and Triumph sort of thing. So to go back to that period and have, it's all electric and absolutely, have to sort of understand that that's the way that we're going with things sort of thing. But yeah, give it a read, because I had a really good chat with one of the PR guys at MG who sort of made that case for an electric sports car, and he made quite a compelling sort of sell. So yeah, definitely worth a look.
Yeah, James and I had a go in it while we were there as well. So
you did.
I went in it and I tried the boost, the
launch control.
Launch control.
Yeah,
that's it. And I tried it within reason, but I knew Jesse would give it some beans, so I was like, I'm going to get in the passenger seat. And honestly, I don't think I've been less scared on some of the world's hairiest roller coasters and in a car park. But I think it's a great kind of, as MG goes, it really pays homage to that kind of, that brings modern and classic together and fuses those two, the kind of electric powered car. But
I'd be eager to give it a more thorough road test, because we weren't really allowed to sort of actually take it much beyond the car park, because this was sort of one of their very early models to hit UK shores. But yeah, you
definitely got a feel for it though, didn't you?
It's straight line acceleration.
You got to look at the scissor doors. You got to get a sense of how the driver's sort of like surrounded by multiple screens, and how it's all sort of directed towards them, sort of thing.
The doors are brilliant. I love those. But I interviewed the owners of the Porsche Boxster and the Jag XK140, and it was so much fun just chatting to them, getting their take on those cars. Especially with like the guy that owned the Porsche Boxster, who previously owned a 911, and he said, there's not that much difference between driving a Boxster and a 911, but you're not paying obviously quite as much. And then equally when September and the Jag XK 140 and how popular they were at Goodwood Revival, not just on track, but with people rocking up to Goodwood Revival car park in an XK 140, it's the perfect car to, it's a little. The owner of the XK 140 was saying, it's brilliant because I've got that extra space for the wife to get some of her luggage in over my XK 120. I mean, this is the world we live in where someone has an XK 120, 140 and a 150 and can pick whichever one they want. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it?
Very much. But yeah, I mean, I had the Ford Mustang as a cover, again, a car that's dear to me because I love my sort of American stuff, and again, we've got one in the family, and it was nice to see the celebration of the 60th year of that car as well this year. And then also I was reunited with the Mazda MX-5 that I'd had at the start of the year for the Sustainable Fuel Test. We'd also celebrated the MX-5 in June with the 4-car road test.
Yeah, so we did 35 years of the MX-5, and we also did 30 years of the MX-5 Owners Club. And it just felt like it was a good idea to bring that car back because obviously there was the bigger story around sustainable fuel and what that means for the future and its rollout and how pivotal that may be in ensuring that our cars can stay on the road. So
and the MX-5 in and of itself is also a great sort of flag bearer for the classic community moving forward because it is aging into becoming a classic. Certainly that Mark 1 is not very far off of that sort of realm of age bracket, certainly. And at the same time, it's bringing in this sort of new wave of classic enthusiasts, of younger owners and younger members. So it's great both that we're able to test the fuel that will keep classics on the road, but also the car that is going to sort of be the next standard bearer for classics on the road.
I mean, the November Classic Motor Show at the NEC, the MX-5 Owners Club actually handed the reins over to their younger members. They had 7 cars on the stand, and all of them were either belonged to younger members or were sourced by them, sort of thing. So I think they arranged with Mazda Heritage again to have one of their cars. I think it was their Mark IV that they had on the stand. So they had each the 4 generations, but front and centre they had 3 Mark I's, each belonging to someone who was under 25, sort of thing. So, and it was them that was involved in bringing that sort of display of cars together. So.
It's a nice car for all the sort of things that it means from not only across the year but also for the wider classic community. I think one of the things that really stood out to me as we were sort of putting together the sort of piece in the shoot actually at Withall was that community side of things. It was the fact that we had all these 12 owners with 12 incredibly different cars. Well, 10 owners with 10 incredibly different cars. Mazda weren't there with the MX-5 and MG weren't there with the Cyberster, but you had this sort of great breadth of cars, but all these people united by their sort of passion and support for older cars, for keeping things on the road, for keeping things going. And it's that community that always really strikes me when we go to these events, that there's more to this than just simply having a nice or fun or interesting car. It is that social side of things that's been one of my great takeaways from this year, and I think that's sort of a bit represented in some of the events we've been to as well. Things like Interclub, like the NEC, the Resto Show, it's been that sort of social side, the supporting others, which has been really more enjoyable at times than some of the cars we've seen out on the road. It's just sort of seeing that community spirit, which has been great.
And talking about that, and none of what we've sort of pulled together as a group would have happened without the car clubs. I mean, the Porsche Club of Great Britain was instrumental in getting us the Boxster, the Fiat car club, not the Fiat car club,
Fiat 500 Owners Club?
Fiat 500 Club was the one that brought us together for that. Their chairman attended. Most of the cars came from car club sort of thing, albeit I was able to bump into a few owners at the Withall Cars and Coffee meets. So the Jaguar XK 140 actually parked next to my Mini, and I sort of asked him if he would like to join, and he very graciously did. So,
and he by proxy brought along the Mustang.
Yes, his next door neighbour on the Mustang.
Yeah. But again, it's that community spirit that really makes classics that much more fun to own. And
it doesn't matter what you own or what you drive. Everyone supports each other, and is interested, and you can come away from these car shows with like 10 new best friends.
I think we can definitely say that with a sort of level of pride with the Withall meets that we'd started up early this year, that David's been a great sort of supporter and driver of.
Yeah.
Is you go along to them and you see again the huge diversity of what shows up at Withall, sort of queuing to get in before 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and you go, that's an incredible array of cars, and then the owners are all just sort of mingling amongst themselves, chatting, having a look round, and it's created this really nice sort of monthly meetup sort of batch of people that just sort of, I think certainly there's a lot that become sort of regulars at it, a lot of cars we see sort of coming back each time and owners that are coming back each time, and it's really heartwarming to see that. Again, at the same time, it's sort of become a little fixture on people's calendars.
It's my big takeaway from this year is that that thing that I hope would happen, which is people will become less siloed within their respective interests of particular marques. They're actually branching out and speaking to other people and engaging with other cars. So the Withall meet is a prime example of that. Interclub International, another example of that just that willingness to collaborate and to meet up with people with different interests within the same community, within the same sort of classic car hobby. But yeah, we're seeing lots more events where sort of MGs and Triumphs are sharing a show field and things like that. And I was had an awareness of it before this year, but I've actually seen it in practice on multiple occasions. And it's really good to see, because I think it's really important that we see ourselves as a bigger whole rather than just sort of keeping in our lane with our respective marques. I think that's going to be key to our sort of not just survival, but getting bigger and bigger year on year.
Well, we found that when we went to the London to Brighton run in June, that camaraderie and let's say the social aspect on the London to Brighton. Everyone was so happy to chat and talk, and a lot of the owners we spoke to, they tell you about the other cars they owned, so they weren't just siloed to that one car, or they tell you about cars they had or cars that they're looking to buy in the future. So although there's lots of trends and tribes probably within certain, a lot of people are interested in more than one type of car. That definitely broadens
that's
our
absolutely
hobby.
fine. It's just that willingness to sort of engage with other cars. Absolutely have that enthusiasm and that passion. That's what sort of drives the hobby. But just that appreciation to share that sort of interest with other people outside of your sort of immediate sort of marques and models that you love.
And I think certainly on London to Brighton run, there's a lot of people that do it as groups, but they're often people that just happen to know one another and all have a classic. They're never from the same marque or the same model or whatever. It's just people that get together and do it as a fun event together, and that's where you get these outstanding sort of displays of various classics sort of heading down sort of lines and lines at sort of Brighton seafront. And again, it's much the same as the NEC. You see people sort of buzzing from stand to stand because they know someone over here at this stand, or they want to go and speak to their friend over here. And it gives it that sort of thriving hub, and I think for me that's the sort of community spirit has definitely been my sort of big takeaway from 2024.
Absolutely, yeah. And so things like kind of like the Goodwood Revival car park, you get a lot of people, or any other car event, they get out of their car, lock it up, and then go around and look at everyone else's classic and give it the time, the time and the attention. And then there's some that kind of, they get a picnic out the back of their car, and they welcome you to kind of have a bacon sandwich with them and chat to them. And it's lovely. It's really a really lovely hobby to be part of.
It's one of those things that's sort of genuinely quite delightful, and again makes sort of
feel good.
It makes you feel good, and also it's one of those things that we have a very privileged job, but it means you come away from it sort of every time going, I don't think you'd have this in any other line of work. Is that aspect of community, which is really quite nice. And so with sort of our big lead story out of the way, we'll sort of shuffle into something a bit similar, which is our top memories of the year, our adventures in our cars, the road tests we've enjoyed, the events that stand out to us. We're all going to have some highlights or some bits that didn't quite go to plan. I think certainly if you pick up the issue, you'll read about some of the events that were blighted by the best of British weather. Silverstone Festival and Goodwood Revival spring to mind, certainly, for being outrageously wet. But certainly between the two of you, I'm sure you've got some ideas as well to chuck in. So we'll start sort of who wants to go first, sort of for one of their top memories of the year.
Well, I might lead into this one too, Chris, to take over, because I was very much an assistant to Chris on this one. But it was the MX-5 shoot, the 35 years of MX-5, and I came along just to support. I didn't drive any of the cars. But
well, you didn't. You weren't there to sort of do rides or anything. You helped out with the photography, but you did get to sort of do some driving.
No, I thought. Oh, I did, didn't I?
You did, yeah.
Sorry, my memory's going. I did, but I tell you what,
you drove the Mark 1 and Mark 2 back to back.
That was it. But that was right. You drove the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 out, and then I drove them back. That's right. I do remember now. But my big takeaway from that was not necessarily the driving side of it, but it was very much the being a passenger in an NA or an NB. The Mark 1 and Mark 2. And what that feels like, and the thrill you still get from being a passenger in those cars. You don't need to drive to really enjoy that element. And I was surprised actually because I've been in a Mark 1 before, but not a Mark 2. I own a Mark 2, but it's on my dad's driveway and hasn't moved since 19...
Ongoing.
I don't know what year it was. Anyway, that's another subject. But I was surprised about the similarities between the Mark 1 and Mark 2. I thought he'd lose something in the Mark 2, but actually I feel like there was certainly when I drove it, I felt like there was some... I'm not going to get into a debate or competition about which is best here, but I certainly felt like the Mark 2 added something.
From my takeaway from that particular shoot was I can now get an understanding of why it is that the MX-5 car club is such a big club. It can be because each of the separate generations offers something very different. I think you've got the Mark 1, you've got just handling supreme. Might be at the expense of power, particularly if you're looking at a 1.6. But it is just the car that if you're looking for sort of that telepathic sort of steering and incredible feedback levels and things like that, you go to the Mark 1. Mark 2 feels like a bit of an all-rounder. It offers the extra power, slightly at the expense of some of that sharpness, but it offers a really good compromise between both. Mark 3 is probably the best car that you would want if you wanted a daily. It gives you some of those sort of practicalities and quality of life things that are missing from the compromised in the earlier generations, just for that sort of raw feel. So you might love the idea of having a two-seater sports car, but the Mark 3 is the one that you can see yourself sort of living with daily. And then the Mark 4, I mean, you drove that one. You can probably talk about that more.
The Mark 4 is
return to form of is basically back to Mark 1 idea, isn't it?
It goes very much back to the Mark 1, but sort of the idea, but done through completely a modern lens. So you've got that bit more power, but there's this sort of all-out focus on exactly how it should feel in the small of your back as you're driving it. You sit pretty much over the rear axle, so every sort of movement you make through sort of turns, and as you apply power, you feel the car moving with you. And this is going to sound a bit contrived, but the original basis of the MX-5 was built around sort of the idea of horse and rider as one, which is there's the Japanese phrase that goes with it that I can't remember off the top of my head. But having done a lot of horse riding, the Mark IV genuinely feels most like that. It feels like a car that you have to engage with, and you can genuinely feel it and work with it as it moves underneath you. And as you sort of feel the car move, you feel yourself, you don't brace against it, but you have to sort of ride with it. And that is something that genuinely feels very special to get in a sports car. And I've driven all manner of them. Certainly for me, the early Lotus Elans remain one of my sort of highlights when it comes to a good handling car. But that Mark IV MX-5 just makes it feel a bit more special. It makes you feel involved. The Elan, you pilot it and you get to enjoy the fact that it responds immediately, but you sit sort of almost atop it like you're on a skateboard. The Mark IV MX-5, you sit within it and you have to engage with it to get the most from it. You can just drive it along and it will respond as a normal car, but if you properly dig your heels into its sides and really give it some, it becomes a different animal and it is sublime.
That's the Mark. I think Mark IV is beautifully designed for a modern car. It's still got that classic feel to it that emulates the Mark 1, 2 and 3, but the hardtop, they really thought about the design of the hardtop to make sure that it still looks good, soft top or not.
As I said, my takeaway was that I can well see why it is someone within that particular car club might have one of each. Which why would you have 4 sports cars that are all MX-5s? And well, I can kind of see it now, having driven each of them, why it was you can sort of have one for sort of your full-on sort of hobby car, that's maybe the Mark 1, and then you can have one that you can use sort of daily, which would maybe be the Mark 3 sort of thing.
It's hard to see that Mark 3's got classic status now as well.
They came out of production, 2012, 2014, so they're, even the youngest one of them is going to be over a decade old.
Yeah.
And again, you can still take them to a Mazda dealership, but again, at the same time, it's a car you can work on your own. It's easy to understand and sort of process in the same way that you would with a more typical classic car. And even the Mark IV still retains some of that character to it. It's still a car that you can sort of get your hands a bit dirty with. You can still engage with in a mechanical sense as well. So they all have a bit of the spirit of the classic car, which is great because that's what the Mark I MX-5 derived from. It was just supposed to be something to usurp the MGB, the sort of the British sports car.
Yeah.
And ultimately that little bit of heritage still runs through them as well. It's
curious to see where Mark IV prices go, because I don't think they're anywhere close to their depreciation sort of curve yet. We've definitely seen an upward bounce on the Mark 1s. Definitely seeing that now with the Mark II sort of thing. I still think the Mark IIs remain sort of the bargain. It is possible to sort of get one for maybe sort of $3 to $4 grand. It's not going to be perfect, but in the context of maybe paying sort of double that now for a Mark I, there's a lot of value there, sort of thing. So, but I mean, the Mark IVs are still sort of hovering around like the 15 to 20 mark, I think.
You're getting a relatively decent mileage Mark IV on the second-hand market for around that, or you can just go and buy one brand new from the showroom if you want to.
Yeah, but I'd be interested to see if they did, because if they do, I think that's probably a car that I'd be looking at in the next sort of 5 to 10 years.
It would be one to keep an eye on. It's sort of one of those trends that I think is going to be interesting, because we so rarely see that with like a lineage of cars that sort of all seem to resonate so well. They become classics that quickly that you don't look at the Volkswagen Golf and go, the Mark VI, that's almost certainly a surefire classic. You just sort of go, the Mark V GTI certainly. The Mark VI, you sort of go, well, they did a GTI version of that. I suppose that'll become cherished at some point, but I don't think it will earn that outright status. Mazda was able to so brilliantly focus the abilities of the MX-5, and I think it's small wonder we end up putting it in our sort of top 12 cars of the year. And again, having spent a lot of time with the Mazda Heritage's Mark I, it's baked into me now sort of why this car is so special and has the following it does. It's one of those cars that you immediately go, oh no, this 100% makes sense. Even if you're stuck in a field with it late at night trying to get a lovely Star Trail photo shot for sort of a feature in the February special. That's a bit of behind the scenes,
That's very much on you, though.
The sort of stupid things that I do end up getting up to with cars are sort of reverse engineered that feature on sort of the grounds of, I've got an idea for sort of an image and a headline, and then just sort of put everything else together around it. But at some point that did also mean getting my dad to tow the car out of one of my fields, because I'd driven into it, the ground was frozen solid, so it was easy going until I got to a bit that wasn't quite as frozen, and it just sort of bogged down completely. And that was...
Tell you what you want about Jesse Billington, he takes risks when he drives his car, he has some excitement.
I go to
this was the one he borrowed.
This was Mazda Heritage Fleet's MX-5. They did email me back saying they'd never had a car returned to them so clean. So thank you to the car wash at my local Tesco's, because otherwise I reckon the email I would have got back would have been very different.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
But there is that photograph remains sort of one of my favourite that I've taken this year. I think that if I get a chance to somewhere on the CCW social, I'll put together like our greatest shots from the year as well. But this out in the sort of darkness of the countryside, forging a new path, as the MX-5 does for both classics and sustainable fuels. Other shoots that we've enjoyed this year, then?
So one of the shoots that I enjoyed was one where I didn't drive any cars at all. I went to a young driver event at Vista Heritage back in February. So Young Driver is a company that offers kids under 17, those who are too young to drive, the opportunity to get behind the wheel of cars on private roads. Their bread and butter is Vauxhall Astras. And the vast majority of people there were driving those cars. However, the reason that we were there is because they've introduced a fleet of classics. They have an Austin 7, a Morris Minor convertible, and a Vauxhall VX 490. The people the kids who are there with Vauxhalls have the opportunity just to, on the day, raise an hand and say, I'd like to have a go in an older car sort of thing. So I was able to interview some of the kids that did that. Paul Cowland was there with his two daughters, Amber and Poppy, so I was able to have a word with them and see what they made of the two cars. Amber's sort of a dyed-in-the-wool sort of BMW fan, and she sees that as being the car that she wants to have when she grows up, sort of thing. But yeah, her head was genuinely turned by the Morris Minor and the ease with which she was able to sort of drive it, and the feedback she was getting, because obviously she had to go in the Vauxhall Astras as well, and yeah, just the genuine sort of response I was getting from these kids was just like, oh wow, this, I can feel what's going on, I can understand what's happening, sort of thing. So I don't think classics should ever really be underestimated as a means of introducing those new to driving, because they wear sort of their colours on their sleeves. You get a sense of what they're doing. It's not masked by driver aids and things like that sort of thing. So according to the MD, it was actually Quentin Wilson that advocated having some classics on the fleet for that very reason, because you get that sort of far greater connection with the mechanicals behind it and what they're doing, sort of thing. So it was really interesting speaking to those kids, and it might be that off the back of it, they've decided that they're going to have a classic at some point in their lives. But even if they don't, I think they've got something valuable from driving something older, a respect for those cars, and an understanding of how those cars behave on the road. So when they do encounter them, when they're driving whatever it is that they choose to drive, they're probably better equipped to sort of give them the time that they need, the braking distances that they need, the extra space, and that can only be a good thing for sort of road safety going forward.
Yeah, it's an appreciation that not every road user is equal going forwards, and also I think driving a classic makes you drive differently. I won't say better, but you certainly have to focus more on what you're doing.
You're more engaged.
Easy in a modern car where you've got sort of lightweight clutches, you've got sort of incredibly power assisted steering, you've got all those driver aids to sort of zone out a little bit from the actual act of driving. Whereas in a classic, you have to focus on where you're going. You haven't got ABS, so you can't just stand on the middle pedal when something's going wrong ahead of you. You have to be reading the road, you have to be looking at what people are doing around you, because you're often smaller, you're often not as fast, then people aren't looking out for you. In the same way that sort of I always advocate for people to always go and do their CBT, go and do your first round of motorcycle training, because it will completely readjust how you drive on the road. The same can be said for classics. Go and drive a classic car, get an appreciation of the fact that not every road user is going to be the same, and it readjusts how you will drive or how you'll operate on the roads, because it's a valuable thing. And I think it's a great scheme that's launched, and it's great to see the sort of really active engagement that a lot of younger people are sort of taking with it as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Certainly with regards to braking distances as well, that's the one thing I always really did went to the veteran classic car run, that's the one thing that they say a lot of modern motorists don't take into account is the braking distances, and some of the older cars can't, brake quite as quickly as they'd like to.
Yeah, there's no ABS when it comes to applying a wooden block to a spinning axle. There's just hope and a lot of time. But yeah, that was one of the more interesting pieces we put together. And again, it's that sort of looking for the next generation, the future of what becomes of classics, because it feels that for a fair while, classics have been, I don't want to say stagnant, but sort of quite happy within themselves. There's been this sort of almost sort of lack of looking to what happens next, and I think we're seeing that now. Again, it's that community-driven thing of going, well, who is going to be in here next time, next year, 12 years time?
Yeah. And as I say, it might be that, off the back of driving a Morris Minor, it might be that people don't want the Morris Minor, but it might be that they're sold on the idea of having an older car. So maybe it is that they don't find themselves in a brand new Clio or equivalent sort of thing. They maybe go for something maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years older, because they know that they've driven a 60-year-old Morris Minor and coped with it absolutely fine. There's not that fear of having something that's older. It doesn't have to be something that's scary.
And it's nice that sort of next seed is being sown.
Plus, it must be quite cool when you're starting at university and everyone else does have no offence to the Corsa owners out there, but you rock up in a Beetle or a Morris Minor, and it just looks cool. So outside your student digs, right?
Against the sort of general sort of monotony of sort of Fiat 500s, Corsas, and Toyota Aigos, someone pulls up in sort of a Morris Minor or sort of even like a fairly sort of standard saloon, like sort of just pulling up in like an Allegro or a Marina, you're immediately different.
K11 Nissan Micra, I think that's the point, isn't it? When you are talking about cars that are brand new or maybe only a couple of years old, even something like that gets lumped in with the Morris Minors and the far older cars, doesn't it? So
you heard it here first, listeners. You want to be cool at university, go get yourself a classic.
or get yourself a K11 Micro.
Yeah.
Considering that when I was at uni not all that long ago, the K11 Micro was the delivery car of choice, but it's sort of it's somehow sort of strayed away from being the Domino's delivery option to sort of a slightly more respected sort of modern, newer classic, and I'm sort of going, that's a bit strange.
It is one of those whereas, am I now looking for these because I think I don't see them that often and now they're everywhere, or are they genuinely sort of, popping up again sort of thing, so...
Well, I scratched a bit of an itch with the Anglia car auctions shoot we did earlier on in the year. And they were, as always, absolutely brilliant at Anglia car auctions, really looked after us and helped us drive a really fine selection of classics that were going up for sale in their June auction.
It was their June auction, yeah.
So I scratched an itch with the 1991 Vauxhall Astra GTE. Always lusted after them as a child. Always wanted to sit in one and drive one, and I got my chance, and it was a lovely car. I mean, that ended up selling for about 16 grand, and clearly inspired someone else to come and sell theirs in the same auction that I sold my Peugeot in. Because when I went to drop my Peugeot 406 Coupe off, I saw a 1990 example there, and almost very, very, very similar. Another Astra GTE 1990, that sold for 10 grand. So it was very hard to not rock up at that same auction and immediately sell one to immediately bid on another one. But I didn't have the money to even consider that, but in a dream I did. But that same day I also got to drive a car that Chris was going to buy in the future, which was his Mini, and we happened to be taking that on a photo shoot. I knew Chris was interested in it anyway at the time, and
I picked it half thinking that it might be a car that I'd be interested in, and yes, it definitely progressed beyond that.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was great to be able to drive actually, because and Mike and I both had a go at it. We drove it.
Yeah, more than a go.
we drove it a good 20 miles.
30 miles away from minutes.
We needed our Tesco meal deals. Other supermarket meal deals are available, we gave it a good drive, and it was the raw mechanics, raw feel of the car and feeling it was just it's classic driving at its very best, and more room in there than I kind of would have given it credit actually. Absolutely fantastic. I think I came out of that and I said to Chris, I said, if you buy that you're onto a winner. And I mean, I know less about them than you do, and I'm so glad you did buy it.
Well, I mean, I admit in this issue that, because both you and I do a bit of a recap, don't we, on our classics, you talk about the Polo, I talk about the Mini. I had kind of an epiphany where I decided that I wanted a historic vehicle, so I wanted it to be 40 years old sort of thing, just for that badge of honour more than anything else, I think. So I wanted a proper vehicle of historic interest if I'm going to sort of write for Classic Car Weekly. That's not to say modern classics not allowed, it's just that I personally wanted something that bit older sort of thing. So, but I wasn't expecting to go that old. I was thinking sort of Mark III sort of Mini, so maybe look at sort of an 80s Mini. But the opportunity to go to Anglia car auctions came along. This was one of the cars that we consigned. I just thought, I'll have a look at this sort of thing. I was attracted to the modifications that have been carried out. So, it's got the bigger engine. It's a Mark 1 64 Mini, but it doesn't have the 850. It has the 1000 8 series engine. Yeah. Along with a variety of other mods as well that I won't bore you with sort of thing. But yeah, it feels quick in something that's fairly featherweight, with some nice sort of handling mods carried out as well. It's had its track widened sort of thing, so the wheels sort of come out of the arches a bit more as well sort of thing. So just enhancing that sort of cliched sort of go-kart feel sort of thing. So and just tuned in a way that it just loves to rev sort of thing, encourages you to do so sort of thing. So yeah, I'm absolutely smitten with it. Really love it. Looking forward to next year sort of improving upon it really. So just making it that bit more usable. So
I had a rather nice 61 MGA 1600 coupe for that shoot, and I really liked it because it was nice to be able to contrast that to my MG Midget, which are two sort of cars from the same mark but two very different applications of the concept, and it felt sort of that bit more bigger, that bit more grown up, and again it handled really quite sweetly. It had this sort of little well of torque that you'd really drive it through, and I came away from that sort of going, I can really understand these sort of 50s sports cars as well, because sort of MJ started out in the 50s, so it might have been a 61, a very late example of the car, but you sort of go, oh no, this is quite a sweet treat. But for me, the highlight of that was hopping in the Maserati Quattroporte.
That was absolutely gorgeous.
Everybody loved it.
Yeah,
we all had a good go in that, didn't we? It was unbelievable. It felt like your grandparents' 1970s living room inside it, but just with added. It had so much going on with the power steering and the electric windows and things that weren't.
The seats just looked like lounge furniture.
Yeah, it was sublime, really. And
There's
again,
nothing like it, is there?
as soon as you sort of turned over that V8 in it and it sort of settled down, you could absolutely, won't say rinse it, that doesn't feel too professional, but you could enjoy the full sort of breadth of its baritone exhaust note on the open road, and it was, stunning. And the weird sort of big, very chunky gearbox, you properly got a sense you were rowing through it, and it just felt planted on the road.
It was our content editor, James Peen's pick, and I can't remember why it was that he wasn't there. I think he was unwell, bless him. But he missed out on an absolutely brilliant car there. He had a fantastic pick. He was one of the first to sort of sign up to that car sort of thing, because it's very much, I organised this on a first come, first serve sort of thing. He immediately replied with this, denying some other people who really wanted it. It was incredible. Low mileage too, it was only sort of 21,000 miles on it. So, absolutely tight as a drum.
It was a car built for driving and enjoying.
You can imagine it sort of going down the Apennine Peninsula, sort of that V8 just sort of burbling away, and sort of it is one of those cars that you sort of go for the cliche of you can hear Matt Monroe's on days like these as you sort of swing around a series of sort of lovely hairpin bends, and you just sort of lay back in these sort of button-back Italian leather seats and just sort of luxuriate in it. It's like
we maybe even had like a drink and a sandwich in the back seats.
I did enjoy my Tesco meal deal in it. I happen to know the guy that bought it afterwards, chap over at London Automotive, and I did send him the pictures afterwards and some of the videos going, enjoy it, it is a stunning car. He was like, I was like, yeah, I tested it. And I think I sent him a PDF of the sort of copy as well to sort of go with it, so you can sort of add that to the file.
Yeah.
It's like, enjoy it, because it is such a sweet car. But yeah, that was one of the sort of the fun shoots that we do really. Again, one of those privileges of being sort of doing what we do is sort of just go to an auction house, go, well, if that, and we've got a photographer, off we go, and just sort of making hay while the sun shines.
Every car was a winner. It was absolutely fantastic. And it's great when those days come together. And you end up discovering something new you never would have driven before.
Yes,
so
you get to enjoy someone else's choice, someone else's pick, and that sort of broadens. You drive the things that you wouldn't have otherwise chosen. When we did it last year, everyone was sort of baffled as to why I chose the giant Chevrolet El Camino, but then all of a sudden it sort of made a bit of sense as it proved to be sort of one of the more reliable cars of the day, but also perfect as a picnic table for lunchtime, again laying out the feast of meal deals on the tailgate and just sort of going on that and sort of like a giant sort of pre-wrapped buffet.
We missed out on that photo where we could have sort of had 3 people sat on one side, 3 people sat on the other. It absolutely could have taken 6 people.
Yeah, that, again, stands out as one of my all-time favourite cars, mostly because someone had left a bluegrass CD in the stereo, and it was just one of those gorgeous sunny June days. So with the window down and just the sort of gentle tunes of country music going through the window, you're like, oh, I can understand why people buy these over here, because it just has that character. But any other sort of issues or features that still sort of stand out?
Now, I was going to throw the question at you. We've talked about it. What sort of stands out for you in terms of events and road tests?
There's a few that stick in my mind. I think for me, fixing or working on my MG at the Resto show was really fun. Again, it goes back to that community thing of sort of bringing together people and doing silly things with classic cars, which is sort of one of the reasons I got into this job. Was it was that idea of doing things with cars that you wouldn't otherwise get to do. And yeah, pulling apart the brake system on my MG at the resto show, accidentally splitting a caliper, so then needing to A, top up the brake fluid and B, bleed it, was something that then in my always sort of last minute ended up doing very last minute in the show. I think it was, we had 45 minutes to bleed out the full system on the car. And I had no brake fluid and no brake bleeder kit with me. So I was sort of running around the auto jumbles, going to every stand going, have you got a brake bleeder kit? Have you got a brake bleeder kit? Have you got a brake bleeder kit? Eventually someone did, and I was like, here's £20, thank you. And then ran off. Like, I saw a stall earlier that had brake fluid. Where is it? Sort of back of one of the halls, so sort of running off. I'm covered in oil, grease, dirt, and just sort of get there and go, oh, 2 cans of that, thank you, here's some money, and run off again.
But covered in oil, grease, and God knows what else, but no one's batting an eyelid. It's that kind of event.
It's normal, yeah, it's so normal. The entire of the NEC has become one giant workshop for a weekend, and I've got one guy sat in the car sort of pumping the brake pedal, one guy sort of pumping away on the sort of the system, one guy sort of adjusting the bleed nipple. So, and the car is surrounded at this point with everyone just sort of egging you on to get it done. It's the strangest sort of, again, that community spirit of like, this is going to have to, A, it's got to be done because you need to drive out of here, but also B, we want to see you succeed, and we all like silly little MG sports cars. So it was nice to do that, and again, the sort of friendship and the fun memories that still have come back from that one was absolutely phenomenal. And the brakes on that car are now great, especially the side that I did bleed because I had split the caliper, and so I do need to sort of properly balance it across the car. But yeah, coming away from it, every time I drive it, every time I sort of enjoying a back road and sort of press the brake pedal, you get that feel, and that memory comes back of, oh yeah, I remember doing that, and that was good fun. Getting Ant Anstead to help put together a hub and rotor set as well was great.
You rocked all sorts of characters into it.
For getting the photograph of Ant Anstead, I was like, oh go on, because I knew he used to have one. His was orange as opposed to the inky yellow mine is, so it was great to sort of get him in for that. And again, yeah, I don't think he's ever forgiven me for getting his hands absolutely filthy when he's going around shaking hands with people at the event. That's up there, as is, again, one of the other sort of those treasured, very privileged moments is getting to do Hero Challenge 2 earlier this year, with 2 of their Arrive and Drive cars. I had their Frog Eye Sprite and their TR4 for it. And again, getting to sort of do competitive classic rallying was... every time I do it, it's sort of retaking the box on the bucket list, and every time it's that little bit different. It was sort of wet and soggy at the start of the event, and just sort of throwing the Frog Eye Sprite around on sort of mud tracks around the outside of Bicester Heritage was incredible. And yeah, you feel like an absolute legend doing it, especially when the final challenge, by this point we're in the TR4, is a series of sort of like point-to-point sort of time trials across an abandoned US Air Force base. And sort of barreling down the runway, and my co-driver goes there, pointing off to the right, going, there's the cone we need to be aiming for the next checkpoint. And you just sort of heave hard on the wheel, just feel the car just sort of grip, tip in, and then the back end just comes round. And the only way I can describe it is, if you can recall the sort of early 2000s sort of opening sequence to Top Gear, where it starts with that brilliant shot of that Porsche 911 and just sort of full on the lock stops, is just the Triumph just sort of soaring round, and all of a sudden my co-driver has gone from pointing out of the right hand window to out of her window going, there's the cone we're aiming for, and I'm going, it will come round in a second, don't worry. And just sort of getting to the end of that and going, well, that was a hell of a lot of fun.
Well, even if that wasn't what it actually appeared like to the outside viewers, it's what you felt like when you're in when you were in the driver's seat.
And that's what classics do, is it gives you those incredible moments, that incredible feel. It might not have looked quite as leery as that, but there's suddenly a moment where you go, I probably shouldn't have tipped this in at 80 miles an hour, but thankfully it was quite a sort of abandoned and greasy airfield, so it was sort of quite easy to sort of feather it through, and you sort of go, this is a bit heroic.
Well, I had my first taste of historic sort of motorsport as well, because I did the Rally of the Ages. Did that with one of our contributors, Richard McCann. I mean, he'd done sort of Mille and things like that before, so he absolutely knew what was going on. But I was complete novice, so I was doing the driving for that sort of thing. So and yeah, I don't think I've ever come away from an event with a bigger stinking headache, just from the concentration it requires, sort of thing. So I mean, he was doing all the work. My navigator was telling me where to be. All I need to do was just sort of follow his instructions. But still, you get invested in it. You sort of you're looking for the various markers that you need to look for. You're constantly glancing at your speedo. Am I doing the right speed? Am I getting it right, sort of thing? I wasn't. wasn't. I think I finished 42nd out of 48, so clearly did terrible sort of thing. But no, I was still really sort of like invested in it. I really enjoyed it. Well up for giving it another go sort of thing. So I think next time I'll do it in my own mini sort of thing. I think when the event came along, I'd only had it a couple of months. I really didn't want to throw it into something as involved in that when I hadn't had opportunity to check it over. So not the TR4 that you drove, I think it was a different one that I had. It was left hooker. Not that it made any difference whatsoever, but yeah, it had some fruity carbs and I think a bit of a spicy camshaft sort of thing. So it definitely, got along the road. So
yeah. I mean, James, you and I did a bit of route book work as well when we did the London to Brighton run in the summer as well with the polo.
With the tulip route, yeah.
Yeah, and it's fun doing that sort of navigating thing, working as a team, and again, enjoying a classic in a different way to simply going out for a drive or going to an event. One of the ones where you're on the road, and we sort of bombed it to like the first checkpoint to sort of do our media coverage and get the photographs and stuff. And then the second bit, we sort of actually followed the route book, and it was actually a hell of a lot more engaging than I think we anticipated it being.
And it's just so nice not to follow a sat nav, and you're following. You spend more time looking outside at the locations and identifying different points you need to turn left or right at. But what I liked about that, and that's in this today's issue of Classic Car Weekly, is a recap of our trip, our London to Brighton trip, and it was the challenges of overtaking cyclists and Porsches. So the cyclists were actually quicker than we kind of anticipated them. The only time we could actually get past a few of those cyclists was when they were going up a hill.
Going up this huge hill, the one that you sort of climb before you drop down into Brighton. But again, you get up to the top, and because you're looking up for your sort of your next turns and your signs and bits for the roadmap, you actually, like you said, you spend a lot more time looking up and looking out and enjoying the drive, weirdly enough.
Yeah. You have to be engaged by your surroundings, and doing so, you get that greater appreciation. So I know I did anyway. So
yeah,
one of those occasions, I was trying to keep up with the Porsche 944s, not without much driving. They were really enjoying the cornerings, enjoying the Porsches for what those transactional Porsches for what they could do, and my poor little Polo couldn't keep up. But
give it a good go though.
Yeah, Jesse didn't need to navigate at that point. It was basically just follow the Porsches.
Follow that 944S2. But that was a really enjoyable weekend as well, actually.
Perfect June day as well. On the subject of Porsches, going back to your memories of the Resto show back in March, I'm looking forward to the next Resto show this coming March. But one of the things that really grabbed me was the next generation of classic enthusiasts that were coming through and were actually at the show displaying their cars there. It was lovely seeing. Chris and I interviewed David Coulson and his 1985 Porsche 924. At the time, he was he's only just passed his test. He bought the car before he passed his test at 17. And he was trying to get insured on it, but eventually managed to. But it was just lovely to see the next generation coming through and talk so enthusiastically about. Oh, just tell you what, if someone offered me that car or that type of car when I was 17, I'd have been laughing.
Yeah, I mean, the next generation is definitely coming. When I did the coverage for the veteran car run, the veteran London to Brighton, there was a young lass that did it. She would not long turned 17, so she did it on her provisional licence with her dad. And that's got to be an incredible experience to get to enjoy that driving. I think they had, I can't remember if it was an Oldsmobile or something like that, doing a 1900 car. And doing that run and sort of that's your experience of classic cars and getting it. Both of her older brothers had done it as well. So sort of that's how you get imbued into doing something so exciting. And I'm like, that's how we get the next generation, is giving them the chance to do it. But also doing the London to Brighton coverage is something I genuinely enjoy because I love the engineering of the cars, the sort of showcase and the spectacle of it. This year I got up and made sure I was at Hyde Park for the start of it, the carrying of the flag at dawn. That was really fun, shooting the cars. They all sort of set off in their sort of giant plumes of sort of smoke and benzene, half-burnt benzene, probably terrible for my lungs, and then hopping on a rental bicycle and pedalling like Billy-O to chase them across London to get shots as they came across Westminster Bridge as well. Just sort of the sheer manicness of what you can somehow get up to in this line of work was sort of one of those things I sort of go, halfway sort of sat in a queue behind Ross Brawn in his 1903 Wilson Pilcher, sort of going, this is not a normal job. And then the lights go green for bicycles, so I set off and overtake essentially a Formula One world champion. So I'm going, this is a very strange day for me. Sort of you're herring through Hyde Park at sort of barely the crack of dawn, going, this is strange, but oh well. And sort of cameras swinging from around me, sort of getting there, dumping the bicycle at the side of the bridge, and then sort of getting down, getting the shots, then getting back on the bike, back to the car, back in the car, back down to Brighton to beat the first car down to Brighton, and just sort of going, this is a very fun but interesting day. But it's again one of those times you sort of look at it and go, it's a strange hobby, but I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, given when this podcast is going out, and this is our last one of the year, New Year's Day events, what would you guys recommend for anyone listening?
I'm always a fan of Vintage Stony, because that's just up the road from me normally. I'm down in Kent this year, so I might have to find something a bit different, but there's a whole bunch of them out there. I mean, there's a good...
stands out.
Yeah, always a popular choice.
Has the Ace Cafe got anything on this year?
They've got something on New Year's Eve, I know that much. There is another one that I ought to mention as well, White Webs Museum. They've got their New Year Auto Jumble, public entry at 9 a.m, so if you're looking for something to do around somewhere East London, I think off the top of my head, White Webs, Enfield, EN Nut 2, if you're looking for it, they've got their New Year's Day Auto Jumble, so that's worth heading along to as well.
Yeah, just underlines that point that it is an all year round hobby now as well. There is no let up if you don't want there to be, sort of thing. So between sort of cars and coffee meets and sort of these sort of one-off events at this time of year, you can keep going all year round if you would like.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the full listings of the big sort of list of events. I think there's a fair amount of things lined up for January. I've scrolled slightly too far there. Yeah, Vintage Stony, New Year's Day at Cafe and Machine. There's New Year's Day Classic Gathering at Brooklands, as we mentioned. Ace Cafe New Year's Eve Party. They've got that kicking off. And obviously there's a couple of Boxing Day meets as well. There's one Locksheath Classic Car Club in Southampton. There's one Rickmansworth, Hertfordshire Way, Boxing Day Gathering at the Green. And obviously Plum Pudding Races, Classic Car Driving Day at Lakeland Motor Museum. So there's things up and down the country to sort of head off to.
It's worth noting as well, you've put a good feature in today's Classic Car Weekly on up and coming events.
So a load of those are sort of featured with a few extra details. The one, again, if you're going for something on Boxing Day, the one that I always enjoy is Plum Pudding Race at Mallory Park. I'm not ashamed to say I do enjoy a bit of classic racing, and I like my bikes as well. So the Plum Pudding Races started out as a motorcycle event, and now the 750 Motor Club hosts the car racing to it. They've got a bunch of different classes that turn up. There's always a good spread of some interesting classics that turn up. Usually, given the fact that it's the middle of December and it's cold and it's wet and greasy, it's always the Sierra Cosworths with the four-wheel drive that seem to really do well at that event. But there's been some interesting modified ones there. I think one year the chap turned up with a 1,000 horsepower Escort, four-wheel drive Escort, that absolutely smoked the field. And people are just heading out to have a bit of fun, have a bit of a good time. My dad used to race it on his bikes as well. I've got some great photographs of him with his Christmas woolly pulley over his race suits on his bikes there. But it's always a good one to head off to if you're bored of the Christmas telly.
Excellent. And as having said that, as James Peen has put together his best of Christmas television in today's Classic Car Weekly. So, what is it, 7 of the best or TV shows?
Feels like there's more than 7 in it. He's really shoehorned in a fair collection.
He's looked at things that are definitely on television, sort of thing. So, we sort of ran that together, didn't we? Looking at sort of the listings that were coming up, left that fairly last minute to make sure we got absolutely everything in there, sort of thing. And he's come up with a really good list. I won't spoil it, so good luck.
Yeah. Go pick that one up and enjoy it. But I think I'll add in a little bit of space here, because obviously it's just the three of us in the office at the moment, and I will sort of sit down with the rest of our colleagues and have a word about their highlights from the year as well. And we'll no doubt feed that in at this point. So there'll be a little bit of our jingle, and then you'll hear me, but differently. Next on our sort of festive flyby of greetings, we've got our production editor, Mike LeCaplan. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Not too bad. And obviously we've got you onto the podcast first time to have a chat about sort of your highlights from 2024, cars you've driven, adventures you've been on, that sort of thing. Which moments really stand out to you?
Drive It Day for me, I think. I read a piece that your good self wrote in Out and About, and it's an event down near Milton Keynes called the MK Classic Tour. I've been meaning to do it for years, mainly because you get to drive your own car around Millbrook, a proving ground, which obviously is hallowed turf if you're into cars. And I took the NG, and my wife came with me as the a co-pilot, and we had good weather. The car was fine. It performed fine, and it was just a really good day. And to take your own car around the Alpine course is a bit special. So that was a real highlight for me.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those times where you can just sort of kick back and relax and just enjoy your own car and go, well, this is truly a bit special as well.
Absolutely, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I've driven around there loads in press cars, but taking your own car is yeah, it's very special indeed.
Mm. And sort of, yeah, I mean, the dumb question I want to ask is obviously you didn't roll it like James Bond did with his DBS, but
No, I think my wife was a little concerned that that might happen at one point because we discovered halfway through that the car's suspension was depleted, so it was quite uncomfortable, but enormous fun. So yeah,
I
but we
can't remember,
emerged unscathed.
is yours on conventional springs or is yours rise on fluid?
No, it's on hydrogas,
Ah,
and it gives you this really good compromise between handling and ride, but it doesn't last forever. So I suspect it's been leaking for a couple of years now, and it was very uncomfortable on the day. But it looked great. It was super low, so it
yes.
looked cool, but not very comfortable.
At
Sadly,
least they didn't send you down the Belgian Pavé course at Millbrook then. That would have
I think that would have broken it in two. I think, but there you go.
proven
Yes.
proven some bits. Yeah, Drive It Day was a fun one. It was a bit of a sad one for me because obviously I'd not long broken the MG, so I didn't get to go out and enjoy my one. But it was, yeah, I think Drive It Day this year was a good one. As I mentioned with David when I was having a chat with him, obviously next year is 20 years of Drive It Day. Do you think you're going to be sort of matching that, going out and doing something just as big for the 20th anniversary of Drive It Day, or make your own tour, make your own sort of little classic route to go out and enjoy?
I think Drive It Day last year, as in 24, has whetted my appetite to do more organised stuff. In the past, it's tended to be stuff for me. I've just either gone out on my own or gone out with a couple of mates. But having somebody else doing all of the dog work and making sure that it's all organised and runs well is very appealing. So yeah, I think I'll be doing a bit more of that
Mm.
for next year, probably in the Jaguar once it's fit for the road. That's another story, of course.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it means I should probably get to work on putting together a list of sort of tours, rallies, and runs around the UK sometime in early spring so you can get booking. But
Absolutely.
yes, yeah, I had seen the MK one. I was sort of half tempted to book on it myself because it is quite literally my neck of the woods. I was like,
Oh, right,
oh, I
okay.
could do that one. And I was sort of commissioned. I was like, oh, but it's Bicester Scramble. I do like doing that. So sort of like torn in two minds. But yeah,
Decisions, decisions. Yes, it's not a bad
glad
place to be in, is it?
glad to see that at least someone got something out of the sort of 24 tours and runs to do this year, which was a good one to put together. It's always a
I
fun one to put
definitely
that
did. It was
together.
good fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Novice, did you get photographs of your car going around as well? So I think you did, didn't you?
Yes, we the organisers had arranged for a professional photographer. Yeah, there was a load of stuff online and really good pictures, and it's now my desktop picture on my laptop. So that's every time I open the laptop up now, I get this memory of the car hurtling around the Alpine course. So it's yeah, it's good. It's one to keep, definitely.
One of those all-time memories to make, and I think that's what makes classics so quite endearing is you can sort of walk away from them every time, and you've got that little different memory to properly cherish. I think that's one of the reasons why sort of each week we go, oh, what are we putting together this time? And you've sort of got those different ideas, different stories, and different thoughts and feelings coming together, which is always quite a good bit of
Absolutely.
fun. And
Yes, definitely.
plenty to keep us excited as we go into 2025 then. Right, we've still got one issue left to produce, so I shall leave you to crack on with work and wish you season's greetings and glad tidings to all men.
Thank you very much, and to you as well, sir.
And we've got the first issue of 2025 to carry on putting together. So,
Yeah,
feel
we're
like
just polishing it off now. So yeah, keep them peeled because it's going to be a good one.
oh yes, a great way to open the year. Right, Mike, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in the new year.
Absolutely. Good to speak to you.
The content editor, James Peen. What's been your highlight of the year then? What's been the sort of standout moment for you?
Oh, it's like Sophie's Choice. So many when you work on CCW. I don't know, especially if we want to break it down into probably cars and shows, because that's what we're about, really, isn't it?
Mm.
So I think so. Off the top of my head, driving wise, I think most recently I was on a photo shoot for our sister mag Classic Cars.
Mm.
Because I arranged the Dream Drive features for readers, and one of the cars I got to have a little go in was a 1978 Ferrari 308 GT4, which
Ooh,
was a rather lovely day out, driving around Beachy Head.
yes. I've seen
Cold
Ian
but
Skelton's
sunny.
photographs. Yeah, it
Yes,
does look very good indeed.
it's funny though, because Ferrari is one of those cars I've never really considered ever owning, and having watched a lot of YouTube videos and seeing how they're put together and how, say, temperamental they could be, I've
Mm.
never really looked after them. But having spent a day with one, I could kind of see the appeal now.
Yeah, it's one of those cars that once you've experienced it, it sort of kindles that little bit of joy, that sort of, ooh, maybe I get the bug on this one.
I think it's one of those cars that if I owned one, I'd also like to have a chat with like Rupert, who I could ring down and say, I'm going to drive this Ferrari today, Rupert. Have it ready for me.
Yeah, you've got to know quite intimately a specialist that sort of when it starts to sound a little bit wonky, you can immediately send it to them. And it's someone who has like reams of Italian literature that's all workshop based, sort of sat in a shed that they can sort of sift through.
I mean, this one was in impeccable condition as well. It was a really, really like nice right-hand drive, dark green. It's funny, I say it's not a car I'd ever sort of picture myself owning, but having spent a day with one, it was quite a special day.
Converted to it. One of the proper joys of our sort of strange little line of work is you do get to go off and have those sort of moments where you go, "Oh, this is a bit unique."
Well, that's the good thing about CCW is you do get to sort of tick a lot of cars off your list, don't you? Like, I'm
Mm,
sure you're the same. You've got like a dream drive list, and then actually you drive something that doesn't live up to expectations. Like you meet your hero.
mm. But at the same time, you do get to drive those other cars, and you sort of go, "Ooh, actually, I've had that with certainly a couple of Morgans, sort of the 4.4s and the +8. You sort of go, actually, I can really see the appeal in one of these. Previously, I'd never held them in the highest regard, but then sort of did a couple of chases on them. I did them last year, but they just sort of bake into your mind, and you go, "Oh, that's a bit exciting. That's a bit different." If we were to pin you down to say something you've driven for Classic Car Weekly, where would your sort of your favourites lie that way?
Oh, that'd be an easy one. If you remember back in August when we did the team outing to Iconics before the Silverstone festival sale, and we all got to pick our car, well, something that tickled our fancy from. I think I can't remember what the price point was now, but there was the 73 Datsun 240Z.
Yes.
That was my choice, and I seem to recall that everybody had a little spin in it, and everybody thought it was pretty marvelous.
Yeah. Was that this year or was that last year? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that was this year.
Wow, that slipped my mind completely. I must have been on a holiday for that one. I think I might have been in Hungary on a bit of personal time for that one. But yeah, oh no, I think I do remember that one now, actually. Yes, yeah, that is an excellent choice. Ooh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was this year. But yeah, I mean, that's the car that sticks in my mind as being one of my motoring highlights. I mean, I think it had 37 grand spent on it from memory. And it was up for 35 to 45 and didn't find an owner, which is crazy because to my mind, I mean, I kind of like, I'd like the idea of having another 912, but the price of those makes me look around for something that's similar. And I think, and dare I say it, that for less money, you get a better car in a 240Z.
I think that must have been last year's because I remember Chris and I did this year's iconic sale because we did the MGB factory works car, a Sunbeam
Okay.
Tiger, and the what was the third car? 3 litre CSL. So that might have been last year's actually. But it's interesting how they
Yeah.
sort of stick into your head and just sort of, as such a strong memory, you sort of can't shed when it was done.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many cars that you sort of come through the doors on CCW, isn't they? Kind of, yeah, they sort of like Chelbet. If you do them, then you forget about them.
Because you did
Mm.
the Beetle, you had the Jeans Beetle as well earlier this year. You did water cooled versus air cooled, wasn't it?
Well, actually, that was a good day as well. Yeah, sort of air v water, and you could kind of you can see why people went from Beetles to Golfs rather than from our point of view, it's like why would you buy a Golf when you can have something as accountable as a Beetle? But actually, it's a better car all around. Again,
Mm.
dare I say it? But yeah. That was a nice day out as well, and getting to drive both back to back, you could kind of see where they evolved and where they went to, and yeah, why the Golf became such a massive hit.
Because I did last year, I did the test of Golf versus Allegro to see sort of why people swung more towards the Golf sort of about 10 years down the line, where that shift had come from. So again, it's sort of interesting coming at the early Golf test from two different angles, one from the Beetle, one from the Allegro. And yeah, it's an interesting one to sort of pitch the Golf as, because again, at the same time, it's still an ever-present car. You sort of forget that it has such an impressive classic status now as well.
It was nice to drive a later Beetle as well. I mean, most of my stuff I've been driving lately has been all sort of early 60s or 50s, 6-volt cars, you know, and even driving a late 60s or 70s Beetle, they've come on massively from there. So jump up from early Beetle to late Beetle is huge, and then go from Beetle to Golf, you know, it's an impressive leap.
Mm. And when it comes to events, you've been out and about on the sort of show scene a bit this year as well. Is there anything that really stands out to you?
I think probably the inaugural what was it? It was the inaugural Interclub International weekend. Yeah, that was a really good show. A bit of a schlep for me, but it was in the Beetle, the 61. So that was a nice sort of hour and a half drive up, early morning start, get there, loads of really cool stuff, lots of lovely owners to speak to, loads of clubs, a bit of stuff for sale, and just a nice opportunity to meet and greet people and have a good old chat and have a nose. And a lot of people came up and said they'd like the car. They've seen it in the magazine. They've been up to date with the project reports. So it's kind of nice to know that people read the magazine and keep tabs on what you're up to.
I'd had that with the MG when I finally got it back on the roads and up to one of our Withall meets, and someone sort of excitedly came bounding over and was like, "Oh, it's back on the road!" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, I forget that these people read and pay attention to sort of when I break my car and when I fix my car, but it's that nice sort of touch point with the reader. And also, someone was it the Resto show? Someone commented on how nice the shut lines were on the door on my midget, and I was like, okay, thank you. I'd never spotted that before, but apparently it's got a really nice door shut. So yeah, one of those sort of.
What was also quite funny, on a similar lines, was the amount of people saying, "Oh, it's really nice to see one that's completely standard and not been messed around with at all." Well, you've not seen my other one in the magazine very often, have you? Because that's the complete opposite. That's got no ride height. That's got crazy wheels and yeah, all manner of bits on it.
Argument for having one that's really nice and stock and one that's sort of fiddled with to the heart's content, as it were.
One that's been ruined.
Depends on personal taste.
Depends on your point of view.
Yeah. I won't speak on that, as I have choice views on the Volkswagen Beetle. I like some of them, and I think that they respond well to some choice additions and modifications, let's say.
Yeah. What else? Powderham was a good show as well. That was quite local to me. Now I'm down in Somerset, so Exeter was not far at all, and I think there was over 1,500 cars which turned up for the day that I was there. So yeah, I mean that was a fantastic day out. Loads of really cool stuff. Really good turnout of DeLoreans. All manner of bits and pieces there. It's organised by Crashbox, so there's a lot of pre-war stuff. But I think for me the highlight was there was a really lovely 1943 Willys Jeep that was in the cars for sale area. The most amazing sunburnt patina. Like you wouldn't touch it. You'd never paint it. But unfortunately, it had salt sign on it. So that's another one that got away.
Yeah. There's been some really good events across the year, and it just sort of staggers that we've managed to sort of squeeze in so much into what has been an incredibly busy year, and sort of to that point that you lose track of where the time's gone. You sort of go, was that this year? Either sort of forgetting that it happened this year or recollecting something else. I mean, we'll definitely touch on it when it comes to our first recording in the new year, but have you got any early sort of predictions or resolutions for the new year?
Well, the New Year resolution, I absolutely have to get my Caravelle sold. So I have to work on that. Because that's currently sitting outside with a broken tailgate and a flat battery, which is great. And the Beetle is also sitting outside with a flat battery. Well, battery is flat, but it's in the cellar on charge. So I need to pull my finger out, get the Beetle on the road. I need to drive both. I need to sell one. And then we go from there, really. So that's kind of quite a big New Year's resolution. Get some cars fixed and drivable.
Get some back on the road. I'm with you on that one, certainly. The MG is currently without an engine at all, so we'll see what the new year brings. But yeah, here's to that. And of course, a Merry Christmas. And we'll no doubt have you back in the office, and we'll all be back together come the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy Christmas and a Happy New Year.
So next on our sort of staff-wide recap of the year, we'll talk to Mr. Simister, the editor. How are you?
Merry Christmas, Mr. Billington. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. I'm in Media House. I've got my Christmassy shirt on, and you've joined me with the Christmas attire as well, which is nice to
Yeah,
see.
I'm responsible for delivering all of Classic Car Weekly's Christmas presents. So I'm just getting ready for getting the sleigh ready, and I'll be out delivering presents to all the enthusiasts this year.
Well, if readers have already picked it up and read through our latest issue, they'll have also seen that you've done not only our nice list of our sort of top 12 cars of the year, but also your sort of naughty list, the cars that didn't quite make the grade for or reasons many spread. So we'll perhaps even get into those in a minute. But the one thing I want to ask you is sort of what have been your standout moments from the year on Classic Car Weekly, the events we've been to, the cars we've driven. What are the bits that jump to mind?
I think the recurring thing for me is, one theme that I keep coming back to is the way that the hobby has responded to the challenge of bringing new enthusiasts into the movement, and this is an ongoing thing. This is all about getting, people who are maybe in their 20s and 30s and even 40s into snapping up older cars and keeping the wonderful pieces of motoring heritage that we all know and love on the road for many years to come. And I think there've been quite a few initiatives this year which have responded to that really well. So one of them was Rustable, which they had two events earlier this year. So the classic car YouTubers, Steph Hoy on iDriver Classic, Matt Richardson on Furious Driving, and the great guys who do Hub Nut as well. They've done some fantastic work this year and having two events at the British Motor Museum, which have encouraged people to bring along their cars. And it was very much the whole emphasis of that event was around, if you love cars, whatever you've got, it's welcome. And I think those two events in particular this year at Gaydon did a really good job in terms of encouraging people who might not otherwise go to shows to bring their cars along. I think that's a hugely important thing. Secondly, I think that the Classic Car Loan Project deserves very thorough commendation. So they have a great scheme. You might have heard of this. They encourage car clubs to work with new enthusiasts and they will lend them their cars for a year. They team up with Peter James Insurance and they give them top tips on how to look after these cars and maintain them. And we've seen some real results throughout the running of this course. Where enthusiasts have not only enjoyed running these cars, but they've actually gone on and bought classics themselves. So this is a really good way of getting into the next generation enthusiasts hooked. And earlier this year, they had their 100th car loaned out to a young person, which I think is a fantastic result for our hobby. The third one, which is worth mentioning as well, is the Interclub International Weekend. This was in response to individual clubs saying that rising costs, the cost of hiring out venues, public liability insurance, cost of getting hot dog stalls, all that sort of thing, was making it difficult for them to hold really amazing club rallies on their own. So this was a new initiative, a Three Counties showground in Malvern that we supported. And it brought 2,000 classics together from more than 45 different car clubs. So actually, that was again a really positive message for our hobby, which helped encourage new enthusiasts and people who might not normally go to club shows to bring their cars out, engage with other enthusiasts, show off their cars, have a great time, have a few pints, afterwards as well. And again, it's a really great way of sort of safeguarding our hobby for the future.
We've seen those sort of wonderful strides forward when it comes to the community and some really fun events that have sort of spun off the back of it and helped sort of further that more. Have there been any sort of driving moments for you that have really sort of gone, wow, 2024 is the year we did that?
I think there's been quite a few. I mean, again, coming back from Interclub, actually, I had a wonderful drive heading back, all the way from Malvern in Worcestershire, all the way back up to my place in Southport. And on the way there, I took the M6. And for any listeners, I'm sure they will know that Junction 8 of the M6 is thoroughly horrible in every way. So after that event, I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to go on the motorway. I'm just going to avoid it completely. So I had a wonderful drive where I went, through the Malvern Hills, through Leominster, past Church Stretton, some really lovely roads through the border between England and Wales. And it just reminded me that day of having the roof down, the sun was shining, the sky was blue, church bells ringing sort of early in the morning. It was a lovely, lovely drive. One of the best drives I've done in a long, long time, even though my exhaust popped on the way back and I had to get it changed at a garage a few days afterwards.
Such as the fun way with classic cars. We're sort of every time we get those sort of beautiful moments where we're inspired by driving them, and then occasionally they remind us just of their not necessarily fragility, but their sort of age and the fact that they occasionally have a little bit of a mind of their own. Obviously,
All
this year
part of
was
the fun.
all part of the fun. Obviously, this year also we saw the launch of the new Classic Car weekly events, our coffee meets once a month as well over at Withall Transport Museum. And we've seen some great success with that as well. Again, this sort of idea of bringing together the community, this sort of multi-mark event that sort of genuinely celebrates what it is to sort of enjoy classic cars.
Yeah, and I was actually genuinely surprised at how well that took off. That was very much again, it was a very informal bring your cars along. I wasn't sure whether people would want to come along and have a look at a bus museum rather than a car museum, but actually they really seemed to flock to it. And again, I think one of the most positive conversations I had during all of those events was I met a guy who turned up on a Lambretta and he said, "Oh, is it okay if we bring a few bikes and scooters along?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And we ended up in the end with all the bikes and with all the scooters, the bikes, the commercial vehicles, as well as the cars. I think right at the height of summer, we had a turnout of 144 vehicles, which I think for a relatively compact site, that was a fantastic turnout. And then we had another one, our very last one of the year. It was held during Storm Ashley. It was a horrendous day in terms of the weather, and even then we had I think it was the best part of 70 classic cars turning up. Again, they looked fantastic even with all the rain and the wind and awful cloudy weather and so on. And again, it was a really good turnout. So I'm really pleased to say that Transport Museum with all they absolutely loved what we've been doing this year, and I'm looking forward to working with the museum to bring more of those events back to there next year.
Should be a really fun one to look forward to, and I've enjoyed driving over to those when the MG was working top down early morning in the sunshine, sort of thrumming across the Midlands was genuinely one of my sort of driving highlights of the year. Enjoying my own car in that sort of moment, much as you had all the way back from Inter Classic in the Mazda, just sort of reveling in that sort of tranquil moment of classic car ownership and just sort of enjoying it all, and then accidentally forming a small parade of classic yellow cars going back through Warwick on the way back from that run. I ended up in a queue behind a couple of other yellow classic cars ahead of me, and I distinctly remember following a Volkswagen Thing, a Type, all the way through sort of Warwick town centre, and just sort of all the people stopping, staring, and pointing as this strange cavalcade of classics converged on the historic town. Everyone going, "Are they all together?" And I'm sort of sat there going, "We are not all together, but this is fun anyway." It was just one of those moments where you go, "Oh, this is what it's all about. This is nice." And again, the community side of things was absolutely fantastic seeing that.
And again, that's a really important part. We were talking before about engaging with the wider public and people who might not already own classics, and just doing that with your MG Midget going through a town centre, with other classic cars and people looking at it and talking about them. That's getting our hobby right into the public eye, and people will be like, "Well, what was that car?" Or, "Oh, I remember my dad used to have one of those." And those are the kind of conversations that get people engaged with classic cars and ultimately get sort of youngsters in particularly interested in them and buying up our motoring heritage.
And sort of keeping it going for that next generation, keeping people interested. And when it comes to sort of classic drives, I think you've been out once or twice through the year. It's been a very busy one with a lot of other things to keep sort of spinning on plates. But you joined us over at the ACA shoot earlier on in the year, which was a good bit of fun. And we enjoyed sort of a big team outing for that one. What was sort of your abiding memories when it comes to actually sort of driving other people's cars and sort of getting out and about this year?
Well, I think probably my abiding memory of that was seeing a team of 3 or 4 of us pushing a broken Maserati Quattroporte across the Anglia Car Auctions car park. I'm glad to say we got the car working again. But for me, again, the Anglia Car Auction sale that we visited earlier in the summer, in which we focused on in our summer special, again showed just how much metal is out there for not much money. If you're looking to get into the classic car hobby, have a look at the auction sites and in our classifieds and what the dealers are selling, because there's a phenomenal amount at the moment. The prices are a little bit softer than they were this time last year, which means it's a great time to to get into the hobby and snap something up. And the car I spent much of that day driving was an E34 Gen BMW 530i. and I think it was sold for about, it was about five and a bit K, off the top of my head. But again, it was such a sorted car for relatively little money. That's a fraction of what you pay for a second-hand Focus or Astra. And again, it was, from the era of sort of properly balanced BMWs, it was a lovely thing to drive, really good condition. And actually, and the thing that always amazed me with those E34s is that compared to what you're paying for an E30 Gen 3 series now, you get so much more metal for the money.
Yeah, it was just a really pleasant place to be. I remember sort of shuffling that around the car park when we were sort of organizing the big shoot and just thinking, this is actually just quite a nice car, let alone just sort of as a classic. Just you could buy it and enjoy it as a relatively practical daily vehicle because it was just so tidy and you're sort of going, this falls within our sort of relatively modest budget. And you're going, this is quite an appealing buy actually. So it was a good spot on the catalogue and a worthy entrant into that shoot, as it were. And again, it's that shoot was, I think it's one of those sort of moments where you sort of look at it and you've got all the team together. We're pushing cars around a car park in the drizzle, sort of going, this is for our summer special issue. It feels like November. It's cold, it's damp, it's wet. And you're sort of having a joke with your friends. And it's one of those moments where it truly feels a bit special and a bit of an honor to sort of have this as a job. It's sort of one of those moments you go, this is a little bit silly, but at the same time, quite frankly, sort of a unique opportunity. And yeah, there's been a couple of moments like that through the year where you sort of look back at it and go, wow, isn't it? It's genuinely an honor to get to do this. And I've completely forgotten what I was going to ask you as my follow-up question to this, but when it comes to sort of what you're looking forward to next year, obviously we'll get into some sort of predictions and New Year's resolutions, but is there any key things you're looking forward to next year or any news stories left over from this year that you're waiting on a resolution for more so?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really encouraged by was there was a lot of chatter before the last budget about things like paper mile being brought in, and actually I think it's really encouraging to see that the relatively recently installed Labour government have I think they've had a fairly hands-off approach to the classic car hobby, which I think is a really good recognition that in Westminster there is I think a recognition on both sides of the house that classic cars, historic vehicles are a really important part of the nation's heritage and they contribute billions to the nation's economy. And one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing next year is the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs will be holding a national survey looking into, again, how important the hobby is. So I would encourage anyone who's listening to it who's got an old car in the garage to have a look at that when it comes out. We'll share all the details in Classic Car Weekly, and it's not just something where you fill in a form and then it disappears and you never hear about it again. These results are used not just in Westminster, they used to talk to local authorities. They used to talk to Europe. It's a really important part of what we do, and though what's said as a result of those surveys help to make sure that the laws, when they're brought in, respect what classic car owners bring to the national economy.
The lobbying power of the FBHVC is fantastic, and it's often all too easy to overlook the incredible work they do, sort of representing us as a sort of amalgamated voice. So yeah, certainly one to keep an eye out for. So biggest news story of the year, what would you say is the one? Would you still say it's sort of paper mile and the new budget and Parliament, or would you say there's been something else that's really sort of stood out ahead of that? I know I'm asking you this one completely on the fly, so it's asking you to look back on 51 issues of Classic Car Weekly News, but is there one story that still stands out as going, wow, we covered that, and that was truly sort of an incredible moment in the community?
I think that's a fairly easy one for me. I think it's the DVLA and their call for evidence. So, which might sound like a boring topic on the face of it, but the number of letters and phone calls I've had over the years from classic car owners who've been tearing their hair out at trying to get a car registered after a restoration, or they've imported it and they can't get something sorted. And for years, the status quo is that the DVLA they weren't particularly. They didn't have a particularly bad attitude towards classic owners, but I think it was always the view that in Swansea they were just too busy with so many other things. They get thousands and thousands of phone calls and pieces of mail a day, and they didn't really have much classic specific resource. But in the last sort of year or two, that has really changed, and that's led to this big sort of calling for information from the DVLA, and they have many thousands of responses from classic owners, right across the country. As we record this, they haven't reported back yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing what it is that the DVLA have decided to do, and to seeing that being brought in as policy, and to seeing a much more fruitful relationship between the classic car hobby and the guys at Swansea. And my hope over the next 12 months is that that makes owning a classic car, getting it registered, avoiding queue plates, all of those sorts of things, much more straightforward for many years to come.
So there is obviously a nice sort of silver lining to that cloud of sort of, I wonder what they're doing, and something certainly to keep eyes peeled for as we move into 2025. Well, it has been a wonderful little trip back down memory lane. We've covered some interesting bits from obviously sort of the events. And are there any events that are standing out to you for the 2025 calendar? What's the one that people should absolutely have on their list, if you're in your eyes?
The easiest one for me is Driver Day, which is 20 years old in 2025, and it's the easiest event in the world to take part in, because all you have to do is pop down to your nearest shop in your car to do it. So again, keep an eye on the website. We'll promote it in CCW beforehand, but it's one Sunday in April. There are loads of different events and gatherings and runs, everywhere across the UK. And again, it's a really big showcase of what classic cars are about, and getting the great British public to see them and to appreciate them for what they are. So if there's one event that's coming up, get your car ready for April, get it out on the road, and as I like to say with Driver Day, let's get this show on the road.
I think it's at the time of recording 130 days until Drive Day, so that's the timeline I've given myself to get the MG fixed for, because I'm determined to get it out for Drive Day. No pressure, but we've got a plan and it's in action, so we'll see how it goes. So there we go. Drive Day 2025 is the one to look forward to. I think with that we can certainly sort of wrap up your look back on 2024 and a slight look ahead to 2025 as well. So it leaves me with little more to do than wish you some season's greetings, a Merry Christmas, and we'll get back to putting on the work for the first issue of 2025, as we're already getting ready for that.
Yeah, I'll say to all, to you and to all Classic Car Weekly readers, have a great Christmas, a truly classic car New Year, and look forward to seeing you all on the other side.
Excellent. We'll look forward to it. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Jesse.
And with that in mind, obviously, I mean, have we got anything else to mention that we've sort of got coming up over the winter period, or we'll be back in January, really, with an issue that comes out on the 2nd, 3rd of January?
Well, it's dated the 3rd, but if distribution goes our way, it might even land on the 2nd, so you might get it a day early, readers.
The fun and interesting ways that print publishing still works around public holidays and everything. But yeah, we've got the first issue of January already coming together and looking nice and tidy.
Yep. This is why you're looking at me for a sort of a self of what's we've got coming up.
Yeah, did you?
I'm having a quick look. Well, I mean, you should know. You wrote the lead feature. So Jesse is been speaking to some various prominent voices within the classic car community, asking them what they're looking forward to in the coming year, just identifying some of the trends that we can expect, both within sort of auctions in particular, but wider trends that the big voices of the hobby have sort of spotted. Buyer's Guide on 3rd generation Cortina, and also got a really nice story from an owner of an Austin 7 Nippy. That particular car was a barn find, but it's now one that its owner now uses daily, believe it or not. So lots to look forward to.
And we've also got a collation of your cars and pictures. So obviously all the events that we've been out at, from Coffee and Chrome to Our Coffee Meets to sort of Goodwood Revivals, and everything in between. I've been through, picked out a load of the pictures.
About 45 over 4 pages. It's great.
Yeah, I sort of went for it's celebration of 2024, so I figured why not sort of double it to take it to at least sort of that high sort of 40s level, and just sort of put all the pictures together. Some of the sort of really interesting stories that have come out from the year when we've met you with your classics. So pick it up. There's a very good chance you might feature in it, and I think that sort of leads us nicely into what will be the next issue. And obviously there'll be plenty more issues through 2025 to look forward to, with certainly some interesting bits and pieces planned out ahead of it. So
exactly,
gives us a nice point to wrap up on. Otherwise, have we got any final points to chuck in, gents?
just to wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, obviously we won't be recording one next week because that will quite literally be Christmas Day, and as much as I do enjoy spending time with you, I'm sure you'll want to spend the time with your family on Wednesday next week. So yeah, Merry Christmas to everyone, and we'll see you all in the
See you on the other side,
in the new year with a fresh issue and some fresh podcasts as well. And we'll get back to some sort of fictional auction buying as well as the auction cameras fire up, because that's always a good laugh. So thank you always for listening, and we'll be back in 2025. Scary times.
All the best, everybody.